Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Planning and Housing Committee number 25. I want to acknowledge that Ottawa is located on unceded territory, never surrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. Il est important de souligner que la ville d'Ottawa se trouve sur un territoire non cédé de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe, dont la culture et la présence ont enrichi et continuent d'enrichir ces terres. I'll ask Kelly to do the roll call, please.
Councillor Brockington? Councillor Curry? Yeah. Here. Councillor Dudas? Here. Councillor Johnson? Councillor Kavanagh? Present. Councillor Kelly? Councillor Kitts?
Here.
Councillor Lowe?
Here.
Councillor Tierney?
Present.
Councillor Troster? Here. Vice Chair Gower?
Here.
Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you very much. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as items 4.1 to 4.4 on today's agenda. For the items just mentioned, only those who make oral submissions today or written submissions before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the Ontario Land Tribunal if Council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of receipt of the application for zoning bylaw amendment and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comments on these amendments prior to their consideration by City Council on April the 17th, 2024, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? No. Are the minutes of our meeting number 24, Wednesday, March 27, 2024 confirmed? Thank you. Let's see, we'll run through the development review items. I'm going to ask the committee's permission today to take the motion that was brought by Councillor Plant as noticed last time. If I can move that to the top of the agenda. I know a number of members of the committee have a deadline today, as well as some of the delegations who wish to speak to that. To the best of my knowledge, there are no delegations other than the applicants for the development review items. First of which is number 4.1, the zoning bylaw amendment for 930 March Road. Does anyone want that one held? I don't know that we have the applicants with us today, so they'll need to submit anything in writing before council. Is that item carried? Thank you. Item 4.2 is a zoning bylaw amendment for 84 and 100 Gloucester. Did anyone want that one held?
I would, please. Thank you.
That one's going to be held. Do you want the presentation on that one?
I think so.
Okay. Item 4.3 is a zoning bylaw amendment for 100 Weeping Willow Lane. We don't have any public delegations. Did anyone want that held or held? Do you want the presentation on that one? Okay. So we'll have the presentation on that one as well. Item 4.4 is the zoning bylaw amendment for 6171 Hazel Dean Road. We don't have any public delegations on that one. Did anyone want that held or the presentation? I don't see anyone. Oh, I should look at my Zoom. Is anyone joining us on Zoom? Probably, yeah. No. Oh, there's Stephanie. Scott Alain, if the committee is prepared to carry this, do you still wish to speak? Thank you. Is that item carried? Thank you. Which will bring us to the motion that has been brought by Councillor Plant on Affordable Housing Acquisition Preservation Fund. Councillor Plant, you have a revised notice of motion or motion that you'd like to make. If you could read that now, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, did they want to put it up on the screen? Oh, there it is. Hello. Thank you, Kelly. And it's not Councillor Gower who's going to read, it's myself, correct?
That's up to you, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Whereas, as highlighted in the loss of affordable housing rental housing report received by the Planning and Housing Committee on March 27, 2024, the City of Ottawa is losing 31 affordable housing rental units for every affordable rental unit, housing unit being built based on $1,000 a month lease or lease and rent. And whereas the federal government has or is expected to announce within the upcoming federal budget a national acquisition fund to assist in housing affordability. And whereas the City of Ottawa in 2021 approved its long-range financial plan for affordable housing to plan and leverage existing and seek additional funding from other levels of government or through partnerships in combination with the City of Ottawa funding towards the building or acquisition of affordable housing. Therefore, be it resolved that Planning and Housing Committee recommend Council direct staff to 1, assess the merits of a City of Ottawa acquisition preservation fund and or strategy inclusive of a fund dedicated to acquiring affordable housing, including land similar to City of Toronto's multi-residential acquisition fund, MURA, and the City of Hamilton's affordable housing funding program, and 2, report back with appropriate standing committee of Council with the findings of this assessment. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Councillor Plante. My understanding is that Councillor Troster has an amending motion to that. Do you want to make that now?
I do. Thank you, Chair. And my understanding is that this is a friendly amendment. Councillor Plante can confirm that. And we also consulted with staff. It's just adding one more clause. Be it further resolved that the review include consideration of local priorities and work on land acquisition for affordable housing to date, and include engagement with local sector partners, including but not limited to the Ottawa Community Land Trust and Ottawa Community Housing.
Thank you very much. Councillor Plante, do you consider that amendment to be friendly?
I consider it extra friendly.
Extra friendly. So we'll contemplate, we'll consider the motion as a whole as amended by Councillor Troster's motion. My intention was to go into public delegations. We have 3, and then we'll have an opportunity to pose questions to staff before we debate and wrap up on the motion. So our first registered speaker is, I have the wrong page. Who's our first public speaker? Steve Pomeroy. Mr. Pomeroy, I invite you to come on up, and you'll have 5 minutes to present to the committee.
I think it was last week.
Just going to keep bringing you back.
Exactly. Well, so I won't repeat what we said last week. I think everybody understands the issue, the significant erosion of the affordable stock, and the number, the 31-to-1 number that comes from my research. And I think if we're going to address that problem, I've got 2 choices. You can basically build more affordable housing, and if you built 500 units a year instead of the 100 units a year we're doing, we would reduce that ratio to a 6-to-1 loss, but it would still be a loss. The other is, how do we sort of slow down that loss? And that would be one particular approach, not the only approach, would be to try to move some of the existing moderately affordable stock in the private market into non-market ownership, run by a non-profit. We would be able to preserve the existing lower rents that are already there. And I think that's what this motion speaks to. And I'm speaking on behalf of the Ottawa Community Land Trust, where I'm a board member. And this is something that the Land Trust is trying to do. We certainly, in our first initiative to acquire an existing property, we've much appreciated the assistance of the city in providing some additional funding towards that particular acquisition. And I think, we did that. It was our first initiative. It was the relationship with the city was very ad hoc. And I think if we can kind of formalize a process based on the lessons that we've learned, and I think this motion speaks to developing that policy, it would enable ourselves as well as other nonprofits to basically continue to try to address this particular issue through acquisitions alongside building new affordable housing. So for that reason, we strongly support the motion. Everyone's aware that the Prime Minister last week announced the pre-budget leak about a national acquisition preservation fund, which is something I've been working on quite closely with the government for the last couple of years. So we're very pleased to see that in there. But I don't think that means that we could basically not do something at the city level and just rely on this fund. I think there's a great opportunity for complementarity between the federal fund, which essentially is $1 billion of loan authority, and about 500 million of grant equity. So basically on an acquisition, 2/3 loan, 1/3 grant. And that works well for a property that's at moderate, close to 90-100% of the CMHC average market rent. When you start to push down to lower rents, as was the case on the Kirkwood property that the Land Trust acquired, where the rents were only 63% of the CMHC average market rent, that deeper level of affordability means you can borrow less. You can't borrow 2/3, you can only borrow 1/3, and you do need more capital. Alternatively, if things like the city, by waiving property taxes, by providing rent supplement agreements, can increase our revenue capacity, then we can borrow more, but it does require those things. So I think this is, as I say, it's very complementary to have these city mechanisms alongside the federal one, and obviously $1 billion and 500 million in grant for the entire country is not very much. So if we can, stretch that stuff a bit further by having the city policy in place, that would work very well. The motion speaks to staff reviewing examples in other cities and specifically references the City of Hamilton, where I'm actually consulting to the City of Hamilton on developing their acquisition preservation policy. So I would be quite happy to share any information on that to help staff in their work as well. So I encourage committee to pass the motion as presented. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Steve. Councillor Plant has a question for you.
Thank you, Professor Pomeroy. I just had a question because I have a lot of these sort of 3-story walk-ups, especially in the Vanier area, that have affordable housing. And then, they've been in the family for like 40 years. And now the kids want to sell it. They've moved out of town. And the fear is like a big developer will buy them. And they often do, actually, and the rent sort of double overnight. But the one thing that was brought up to me was if we have an acquisition fund, this will actually just increase the costs of these 3-story walk-ups because people know the government is motivated to buy them. So I was just wondering if you could comment on that.
Yeah, fair question. I think the reality is that what we're seeing in those particular properties and the land trust, we do try to see what's out there on the market, and we've kicked a lot of tires. And what we found is that the pricing on those assets is currently based on not the capitalized value of the current rental stream, but the capitalized value of the rental stream if you jack the rents to the full market rent, kicked everybody out and went to that full level. So they're already overpriced. There's nothing,
Right.
There's nothing that we're going to do that's going to raise that price any higher. Hopefully we can do something to pull it down.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Professor Pomeroy. Nice to see you again. I just have a question. This is not something I strongly believe, but it's also something I hear, that by preserving some of these, single-family homes or, walk-ups of 3 or 4 units, would we be potentially preventing the kind of densification that we need to see in our city to meet our housing goals?
I think this is a tremendous opportunity as a form of a land banking mechanism, where if a non-profit can buy a property that does have redevelopment potential, they can capture it now, operate it, keep those rents low, and when it's then, they can be the ones that are redeveloping it. And if it's redeveloped by the non-profit, it's going to be redeveloped with moderately affordable rents in some kind of a mixed income model, as opposed to a private development which would go full market. So I think we can do both.
I agree. And I also think a point that I make repeatedly at committee is that when we do see some of these smaller buildings come down to build higher, they're not replacing the larger family size apartments that you often see in these renovated homes or triplexes. So, and nonprofits are often much more willing to build family size housing, even in a high rise, certainly much more so than the private market. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate your work on this. As you know, Ottawa Community Housing purchased 311 units, townhouses from Minto, and it was before this was talked about, but it's really been a great coup to have that. But I wonder, there's so many different ways of tackling this, because that's a large-scale purchase, and it's a good one because it's family. But is it needed in all different sectors? Because it's we need apartments, we need all different kinds of housing to be sustainable.
Yeah, congratulations to Ottawa Community Housing on that particular transaction. I think it was doing it buying 6 units at a time isn't going to address the 31-to-1 loss. We do have to get to scale, and certainly what you've done there is great. My understanding is, though, that you've basically emptied the pantry. There's no more money to buy another one. So I think that's where this kind of policy and linking it with the federal policy, one of the things we've talked to the federal government about is whether we can design the national fund to help replenish local funds, such as the Mirror program in Toronto, such as something we might have here, so that you then have a recycling thing. significant that you get your money back that you put into that property, and you can spend that $8 million of equity back on another property. So I think certainly in that regard it works. And yeah, the spectrum of housing across there, whatever's available in the marketplace, the Land Trust is working with Matthew House to help them purchase some singles for newcomers. And then at the other extreme, you've got your project. So I think it does cover the full gamut. Obviously, it's much harder to buy the big properties because you need a lot more money. LCH is probably better positioned to do that than the Land Trust is, but maybe 10 years from now, we'll get there.
Yeah, thank you. And it was kind of a risk to make that jump, but an excellent one.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Pomeroy. I just wondered if you could reflect on the language in the motion in the therefore be it resolves and let us know whether or not you think the language is adequate. I'm particularly interested in your reflections on the notions of assessing and reporting back versus a recommendation that could perhaps be a bit more bold in this case, given the evidence that we have.
I can't recall exact wording of the motion. I don't have it in front of me. Maybe it can be thrown up on the screen, but it seemed quite reasonable. I mean, and I think, as a researcher, I do have a bias to let's do our homework and get it right. So if staff need to a bit of time to look at what other municipalities have done, learn from those, and then craft a policy, and as I mentioned, I'm happy to, the Land Trust and as well as myself, are happy to assist in that. So I don't really think that's necessarily a bad thing. If you basically said to staff, go and develop a policy, you'd end up in the same place anyway. You're just being explicit about giving them time to sort of think about it and look at other communities as well. So yeah, I'm okay with it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Steve, I don't see any further questions for you. Thank you very much for your participation today. Katie Burkholder-Harris, Alliance to End Homelessness, will be our next presenter. Katie, I'm not sure if you know how this committee works, but you'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation. We're in your hands.
They're new. I'll try not to be too out of breath walking. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. 2 weeks ago, we had the opportunity to engage this committee on the value of having an acquisition strategy. 1 week ago, the federal government announced funding for nonprofit acquisitions, and today there's an exciting motion on the floor for the city to take the next step on developing that strategy. The loss of Ottawa's existing affordable housing stock at a rate of 31 units for every one built has been shared repeatedly in the past number of months, and I really credit councillors with recognizing the threat that this does pose to our community getting a handle on the housing crisis. The housing crisis and the homelessness crisis are on the same spectrum, as you all know. Homelessness is sadly the extreme outcome of a housing market that's increasingly unaffordable for even middle-class households. People are falling through the cracks that did not used to. And for those that were barely hanging on before, perhaps with access to a rooming house or a DOM hospital, there are no options left. The loss of private market affordable housing driving up rents to unsustainable levels has meant that those who used to be on the path to home ownership are paying $3,000 plus for a luxury rental. Renters who used to be able to find reasonably priced 2 to 3 bedrooms for under $1,500 are now paying over $2,500. Those who used to be able to find a low-cost unit for less than $1,000 are now on the edge of imminent homelessness, likely accruing rental arrears and making impossible choices between food and rent. For many on social assistance, the remaining options are sleeping on couches, sleeping in shelters, or sleeping outside. City staff and community partners have named many times the challenge of emergency shelter inflow. Without preventing homelessness in the first place, without turning off the tap, all of the great housing work that happens in this community will not reduce homelessness at a community-wide level. To do this, we need to reduce the number of people falling into homelessness in the first place. Much as we point to challenges such as trauma, substance use, mental health, and more, the vast majority of people experiencing homelessness are simply unable to afford a decent, affordable home. The national data shows this, and increasingly the local data shows this too. The 3, soon to be 4 new shelters and temporary housing options opened in the past number of years are predominantly filled with people who have low support needs but do not have an affordable place to stay. In my time at the Alliance, I've heard stories of renovictions from people from all walks of life. People with high-paying jobs, seniors who have rented for most of their lives, low-cost housing communities like Herongate or Manor Village, even fellow colleagues in the housing sector who know the system and what their rights are, yet don't have a legal leg to stand on to actually stay in their housing when a renoviction notice comes along. Acquisition is a necessary tool to ensure that we don't lose any more affordable housing in our community. An acquisition strategy that focuses on nonprofits specifically grows housing stock that is guaranteed to be safely and permanently affordable. Otherwise, any private rental in the current market is vulnerable to being sold and people being evicted from their homes. When we ensure that affordable housing is available for those with the lowest incomes, it relieves pressure on the whole system, a trickle-up effect. Ironically, focusing on increasing nonprofit housing creates real competition in the overall market because there are truly affordable options for people. And the private sector is increasingly behind this type of strategy too. As Steve has pointed out in the past, real estate investment trusts need capital to build new, and selling off old assets is necessary to do this. Given the buy-in from the nonprofit sector, private market housing stakeholders, the recent funding announcement for acquisitions, and ultimately the urgency of the housing crisis facing our community, I urge you to be bold and go even further. This motion is a critical step to moving towards an acquisition fund, but what if the report brought back in the fall is a proposal for a full acquisition strategy? We don't need to reinvent the wheel because other cities are already driving on the road. The Alliance, representing over 75 nonprofit agencies, Ottawa Community Housing already having done a major acquisition, Ottawa Community Land Trust, a number of local private sector housing stakeholders engaged in this conversation, and city staff who have already been working through acquisition with community partners for years are already at the table. We have the right people to develop a full strategy by the fall. The financing for our 10-year plan relies heavily on funding from other levels of government. Right now, the money is on the table. After the next federal election in 2025, it may not be. Let's not miss the chance to protect more of our neighbors from losing their housing and falling into instability and homelessness. The time to act is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burkholder-Harris. There are several questions for you, the first of which, Councillor Johnson.
Hi, Katie. Nice to see you. So thank you so much for your comments today, and some of them kind of already answered my question, but I wonder if you could comment on the wording of the motion, and when you described the idea of going further, faster, what that might look like for you and what you're hearing in the sector.
Let's just write the strategy. You know, there's examples of it in other communities. I think that part of the writing of the strategy will include doing that assessment and assessing the merits of it, but why don't we take the time to figure out what the Ottawa version is? If we come back in the fall with assessing the merits and then there's another motion that says, let's now build a strategy, where does that take us? Where does that leave us? How much money have we lost the chance on? So I think there's a potential to strengthen it, and I really think we're in a good space, and there's so much alignment right now in terms of, you know, staff have to do this work anyways, the renovictions bylaw is happening, they're obviously connected. How can we work together to develop a really comprehensive, community developed with the city strategy? And I think we can. I think we've got, the thinking is here, the experts are in this city and in our community, so.
Thank you for those comments. I'll certainly be asking staff the same thing. I don't talk about this very often, but I was one of the founders of the Ottawa Community Land Trust, and my son is now 3. So it was before he was 3. So it's about 4 years ago that we founded it. It's really exciting to see such energy behind what could be possible with that vehicle. But as one of the founders, I am eager to see us go for what is already proven in other places. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Chair. Hi, Katie, again. And thank you for mentioning I will be putting forward a notice of motion today for for us to examine the idea of a renovictions bylaw, similar to what Hamilton was able to do. And I do think the combination of housing acquisition, reasonable restrictions on rent evictions and potentially looking at a rental replacement bylaw in the future. That's a package of pretty much the max what we can do it as a city in terms of curbing housing loss. But in case there's anyone from the province listening, I'm just wondering if you could speak to some of the provincial regulations that really need to be changed to prevent housing loss. Because I think we're doing all of this as catch-up because of a lack of provincial policy, which is where the root is of all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. We desperately need vacancy decontrol. I actually almost think that's more pertinent than rent control at this point. But then again, reinstating rent control for post-2018 buildings. And I think also, I think everybody's invested in fixing the landlord-tenant board, everyone. So I think that's something too, that there needs to be a return to what worked in the past, improving what we had. And I also think that, and this might seem weak, so maybe I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but I'm going to. I increasingly think that we should at least push for implementing temporary rent control in terms of getting our housing stock caught up to where it actually needs to be, because I know that, we have to find compromises. We're obviously needing to partner with the private sector effectively. And I increasingly see so many private sector folks who are like, yeah, there's just a chunk of the market we can never provide affordable rents for. They see the potential for partnership with nonprofits. Let's get that to a reasonable level. And I think a temporary rent control strategically allows us to have a conversation of, the often pushback of, well, then it prevents people from building, right? So I think there's a compromise there, and I think that at least until we actually get our housing stock up to 10% of our total housing stock as nonprofit, similar to what we were in the 40s, but definitely vacancy decontrol now permanently, and I think there is some space for a nuanced conversation on rent control, but for 2018 buildings, 100% needs to happen now.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and for those listening or watching who don't know what vacancy decontrol is, essentially, with a new tenant, the landlord can raise the rent as much as they want. So during the election, I would typically knock on doors in the exact same building in Centertown, and two people living beside each other with the exact same apartment would have something like $1,000 differential in their rent depending on when they moved in. And so this is a huge problem, and this is driving rent evictions because there's an incentive for landlords to kick people out so they can raise the rent if they're an older building that is actually subject to rent control. So anyway, thank you very much, Katie. Always nice to chat with you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chaucer. Councillor Plante?
Oui, merci. Sorry, my question is just for staff. Hi, Katie, nice to see you. I was just wondering when
we'll have staff up in a little bit. Do you have questions for Ms. Burkholder?
Oh, I do not. Okay, thank you, Kate. No, I don't. Sorry, I was on the wrong thing here. Thank you, Katie. My question is for staff. I apologize.
No worries. Thank you. So, Katie, I don't see any further questions for you. Thank you very much, as always, and thank you for your persistent efforts. And as it turns out, our third public delegation is not able to attend today. So we'll move in. I know members have questions of staff. I'm not sure. I think Mr. Levine will sit on the hot seat. Good morning, Paul. Good morning. We'll lead off with Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. Is the ratio 31-1?
Mr. Chair, can you clarify your question?
Sure, it's in the motion. It's been talked about a couple of meetings now, the ratio of 31 affordable renting housing units being lost for every one that's being constructed.
Mr. Chair, the information that is being talked about originates from a report, so from the authors, and I would defer to them to validate that information.
This committee is contemplating a motion that addresses the amount of affordable rental housing stock that is being lost, and I'm asking staff for their professional opinion. What is the ratio? If it's not 31-1, I'm looking you to confirm what that number is.
Mr. Chair, we can definitely go back and look at those numbers and come back with a verification of the data being produced. But on the surface, we are accepting the data that is in that report.
Okay, I would love to see staff's research and data that they have to confirm what that number is. Appreciate that. Can staff comment on the necessity of this motion overall? My understanding was staff was already moving towards this fund. Obviously, we want to have more information from the federal government once the details of the federal budget are released, but were we going down this road anyway, or does staff believe that this motion is necessary in order for us to get there?
Mr. Chair, we support the motion in the sense that we were going to do the research work anyway in light of what the federal government has been announcing in terms of the federal budget, as well as the increasing popularity of an acquisition fund to preserve affordable housing as a promising practices in the field. We believe that it is very timely to do the research, analyze the best practices, look at different jurisdictions, and look at what it would mean or what it would look like for a program, Ottawa-made program.
And my last question is just about an acquisition strategy, an overall strategy. Can you comment on that, please?
Well, that's another aspect that the research that we're going to be doing and analyzing will produce in terms of information that we can then glean from that research and develop an overall strategy as opposed to patchwork programs. We want to be comprehensive in terms of how we approach the preservation of affordable housing and make sure we all have all the right tools in our toolbox to achieve our goals.
Okay, thank you. And I assume this motion was worked on in concert with the mover, but does this motion lack any wording or direction that you believe is necessary at this time?
Mr. Chair, we believe that we support the motion and we think it's going to achieve the intended purpose.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is actually about the wording of the motion. So am I to understand for number 3, report back to the appropriate standing committee of council with the findings of this assessment, is it implied that that report will come as part of the timing required for the long-range financial plan for approval in Q2 2024?
Mr. Chair, we can't put an exact time frame on it right now. I need to analyze the work, the scope of the work in terms of what we have on our plate right now. But our commitment to you today is that we want to get it done as soon as possible.
Okay. So I have to admit I'm kind of uncomfortable with that. I'm interested then to understand, because I believe the long-range financial plan for housing was actually proposed to come forward in 2023 and then was deferred to 2024, and now we have pieces of that could be relating to dollars and cents that this committee and council are willing to spend that will not be considered as part of the long-range financial plan for housing. Can someone help me to understand how we will make our best financial decisions with respect to the long-range financial plan for housing if there's something missing at that time, especially one that is of considerable interest to committee and council?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The long-range financial plan is in relation to any new expenditures, any new investments that the city would make around housing. Although I know that the long-range financial plan, our housing services is working closely with finance to develop it, and certainly there would be alignment with this project. But I'm not at liberty to speak for my colleagues in finance right now.
Okay, so when I first read this motion, what I understood from how it was written was that the research component for an acquisition fund would come in time for the long-range financial plan for housing. If a strategy was recommended at that time, then we would have that information as part of the decision-making around the long-range financial plan for housing. And so in my mind, this timeline was fairly accelerated from how the motion was written, given the urgency that I think we're all feeling. And we had a fantastic conversation at the last Planning and Housing Committee about construction versus supply and how construction is very costly. This is one of the ways that we can do more faster. So how might I encourage you, or perhaps I can ask my committee members to also consider, how might we encourage you to have this ready for the decision-making process that's part of the legislative agenda?
Thank you, Chair. Again, it's a matter of capacity. What I can commit to without compromising other work that is going on is to bring it back to my team. It's a high priority. We will do everything we can to move things around to increase our capacity to respond. We are working as quickly as we can, and we do wholeheartedly believe that this work is important, and it's also important in relation to the LRFP that we are also working on with finance. So we hope to be able to align everything at the same time, and we are fairly confident that we can do that.
Okay, I'm encouraged by that answer, and certainly I don't mean to harp on it. I know how popular you guys have been in this term of council, and how everyone on committee and council has the next big shiny idea, and you're being asked to respond to every shiny idea and put everyone, you know, at the center of that story. So I appreciate what you're doing here, but again, given that, you know, we came to the city of Ottawa back in if my son is 3, what's the math? So 2019. To pitch this idea, and there was very little appetite for it. I'm encouraged to see the appetite for it, but we have lost ground. And so I will encourage you wholeheartedly to consider this as part of that timeline that I believe had been implied in the motion. And under that impression, I will support the motion, but I am expecting, you know, to have an update in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Plante, Councillor Lowe also has questions. Did you want to go clean up, or you're free to go now?
Not anymore.
Oh, Councillor Lowe is off the speaker's list, so it's your turn.
Salut, Paul. Je voulais juste savoir, peut-être que j'ai manqué quelque chose là dans le back and forth avec la conseillère Johnson, mais je voulais juste savoir c'est quand la date que vous pensez vous allez revenir avec les recommandations.
Monsieur le Président, comme je disais tantôt, on n'a pas une date exacte. C'est difficile de mettre une date exacte compte tenu de la charge de travail qu'on a en ce moment et que nous n'avions pas envisagé un autre projet pour nous en ce moment. Par contre, on va analyser toutes nos ressources et on va faire tout dans notre pouvoir pour justement aller chercher d'autres ressources pour nous aider à faire ce travail dans un plus bref délai, compte tenu de l'analyse qu'on fait pour le plan financier, comme conseillère Johnson vient de mentionner. Ouais. Alors, nous avons beaucoup d'autres projets qui complémentent le projet de cette motion. Mais je veux rassurer le Conseil que tous les employés, nous sommes dédiés à ce projet et à s'assurer que nous avons l'information pertinente dans le temps qu'on a besoin.
Okay. Alors, disons environ avant le prochain cycle budgétaire, disons, avant les discussions pour le budget 2025?
Les discussions... Encore une fois, je ne veux pas me prononcer sur un mois en particulier, mais on va le faire le plus tôt possible.
Pourriez-vous dire une saison? Printemps, automne, hiver?
Disons hiver.
OK, merci beaucoup. J'apprécie. That's all, Chair. Sorry, I should have said it.
No, thank you very much, Councillor Plante. Bear with us just a second. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Given the conversation, I would like to make a motion that the research for acquisition as described in this, or I guess what I'll do is I'll amend. I'd like to make a motion to amend number 3 of the, that's an old motion. Okay, pardon me. Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to amend number 2. Thank you, that makes a big difference. I was talking about number 3 earlier too. You guys were probably wondering where I was. So number 2, I'd like to make an amendment to say, to report back in alignment with the long-range financial plan consideration and approval for Q2 2024. Please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Plant. Councillor Gower? Vice Chair Gower, sorry.
Just like to hear from staff, would locking into that timeline potentially push any other critical work that staff is doing on the affordable housing file? Would it delay any other work or have any other impact?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would believe that would compromise other work that are currently ongoing.
Could staff give us an idea of what kind of work? Putting on the spot, but
Work that is legislated, that is council directed, and that needs to begin or continue or end.
okay. So as you said before, you'd appreciate the flexibility of not having a hard deadline. You've committed previously that you are trying to work as quickly as possible with the resources you have, but you don't want to put other critical path priorities at risk by locking into a specific deadline.
Mr. Chair, that is correct, and I've already mobilized my staff to start analyzing the work and see how we can fit it into a schedule and how we're going to get it done as soon as possible.
Is there any other concern? The federal government announced in broad strokes an acquisition fund last week. Do you have any sense of when we might have details as to what that looks like or the implementation? Will that be available in time for a earlier review that's being asked for this motion?
Mr. Chair, I believe that there would be some information released more after, on April 16th and shortly thereafter, how the specifics of the program work. In my experience, there seems to be some time when these national programs are released and the broad strokes and what it looks like in the fine print and what it looks like in reality and practicality. So I'm confident that we would have enough time to do our due diligence research, work with our partners, do some consultation, come back to you with some options based on what are the best practices out there and see what a program for Ottawa could look like. And more importantly, council is going to have to decide and have a discussion as to where the funds will come from.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. We're going to pause for 90 seconds. All right, give me just another 15 seconds. That'd be great, thanks. So we'll get a little loosey-goosey here, but Christine will alert me if I'm doing anything wrong. So I don't see any further hands up, which means we'll move to the vote. The first vote will be on the, because the Councillor Troster amending language is friendly, that's automatically included in the final motion. So our first vote will be on the Councillor Johnson motion, which would be to amend the Plant motion to read as Section 2 does on the screen with the new language, report back to the appropriate standing committee of council with the findings of this assessment in alignment with the long-range financial plan, consideration and approval for Q2 2024. Could I get a vote, please?
Councillor Brockington?
Yes.
Councillor Curry?
No.
Councillor Dudas?
No.
Councillor Johnson?
Yes.
Councillor Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Councillor Kelly? Councillor Kitts?
No.
Councillor Lowe?
Yes.
Councillor Tierney?
Yes.
Councillor Troster?
Yes.
Vice Chair Gower?
No.
And Chair?
Yes.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
Okay, so is the Plant motion, and sorry, I should recognize Vice Chair Gower has put this motion forward on Councillor Plant's behalf since she's not a part of this committee. Thank you very much. I know that was some work. Is the Councillor Gower Plant motion carried?
Carried.
Oh, a dissent? With a dissent from Councillor Curry.
And I'm carrying it.
All right. Thank you very much, members. Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it. Thank you very much to delegations who came out to speak on that. Okay. We shall continue on. Let's do some development review reports. Meat and potatoes of this committee. The first of which, I believe, is the zoning bylaw amendment for 84 and 100 Gloucester Street. Councillor Troster asked that this be held, and we're going to receive the presentation. Eric, we're in your hands.
Good morning. My name is Eric Foran. I'm a Planner 2 with Development Review Central Unit. Today I'm here to present to you the zoning bylaw amendment for 84 and 100 Gloucester Street. Next slide, please. So the subject lands are 84 and 100 Gloucester Street, as mentioned. The lands are owned by Claridge and abut existing Claridge high-rises to the east. The lands are located in Centertown, in an area characterized by a mix of uses, including residential high-rise buildings, which reside on the same block. The lands are approximately 400 meters from Parliament Station and are close to cycling connections along O'Connor and Laurier Streets. It's a very urban setting. An existing commercial building, parking lot, and swimming pool area with formal access in favor of an adjacent property owner reside on the property. And the proposal before you today removes the existing building and parking lot. Next slide, please. As it pertains to policy, the subject property is designated hub within the downtown core policy area. It is also designated local neighborhood within the central and east downtown core secondary plan, within the Centertown district, just south of the core area. The subject lands are permitted a maximum building height of up to 27 stories. Next slide, please. This is the proposed development. It's a 27-story residential use building. Of note, I will say that the development includes 315 dwelling units, ranging in type and size. There's a formal commitment through this application to have a 1-to-1 bicycle to dwelling unit ratio, and there's a substantial reduction in residential parking spaces, which will be captured by the zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. These are images showing the proposal situated in this very urban and predominantly high-rise context. Next slide, please. These are images showing the landscaping approach at ground level in the front and rear yards, including planter beds and street trees within the city's right-of-way. One of these images also shows the articulation of the front facade due to a defined 5-story podium base, balcony projections, and a slight overhang on the east side, and again at the upper stories of the tower, which recess portions of the building. Next slide, please. This slide shows the zoning details and the zoning schedule that are being recommended by staff today. So the proposed maximum building height will replace a 3.0 FSI requirement, which aligns with the policy permissions of the secondary plan, up to 27 stories. The front yard setback varies, and so this is a reduction from the required 3 meters. This aligns with the existing pattern of development along the south side of Gloucester Street. There will also be sufficient room within the right-of-way for trees and landscaping and a city standard sidewalk. There's a zoning request that deals with additional permitted commercial uses, which is mostly a carryover from the existing zoning. And there are some restrictions being lifted through to encourage a mix of uses on site. And then a couple of the other zoning requests are shown up there. Of note, there's a significant decrease in vehicle parking and the increase in bike parking, which is welcomed given the context in proximity to rapid transit and in the downtown core. Next slide, please. So after considering in depth the policy that apply to the subject property and reviewing the proposal details, staff find the proposed amendment consistent with provincial policy statement, with the official plan and secondary plan policies which apply, consistent with the community design plan build form guidelines and the urban design guidelines for high-rise buildings. And then staff also consider the zoning request to be appropriate for the site, given the site's characteristics and the surrounding context as mentioned. And all in all, staff consider the proposal to be representative of good land use planning. And with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have any public delegations on this one, but Vincent and Timothy, you are signed up to speak. I know Councillor Troster has some questions for you. Do you want to come on up? You have the option, of course, since you're signed up to make comments to the committee if you wish.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. We're happy to discuss the project through a brief presentation and/or just respond to questions from committee members. It's really up to you.
I leave it up to you if you want to make a presentation, if there's something that staff haven't already gone
Sure,
through.
maybe I'll just, I think Eric did a great job on describing the context and the policy and some of the planning rationale, so maybe I'll just do a brief presentation on some other elements that I think are important to consider.
That is your prerogative.
Thank you.
What we'll get, and you have a presentation for us, so we're able to run through any slides that you need.
Yes, so thank you, Chair and Committee. My name is Tim Beat. I'm with FO10 Planning and Design, and this is Vincent Demalm with the property owner and applicant Claridge. So as Eric mentioned, we're here to discuss this property, which is in a very urban setting in the downtown of Ottawa, close proximity to many amenities and services, rapid transit, local transit routes, bicycle infrastructure, as well as employment and recreational and amenity hubs. So it is an area that is considered really very appropriate for urban and residential intensification. Importantly, as was mentioned, the project is aligned in bringing the zoning in alignment with the official plan direction for this site and areas like this, as well as the secondary plan direction. Most importantly, in terms of the proposal here, the height proposed at 27 stories is supported and directed by the secondary plan here. As staff noted in the proposal, the design provides tower height setbacks, tower separation distances that are appropriate and reflected within this dense urban network and community. And so we think that the project responds well to the policy as well as the physical characteristics and context. I think I'll jump ahead to slide 7 and just discuss some elements of the design. So yeah, perfect, great. So as you can see here, and I've decided to discuss this in general or specifically because I think it's some of the comments that we received from the public and councillor's office were requesting some additional information on articulation, interface with the public realm, and tower separation. So you can see here that the design along the street has applied a considerate and responsive design approach, which articulates various aspects and elements of the building to break up the massing specifically at grade, with an inset portion of the building to the east, transitioning to the west where the commercial block of this proposal is included. That reflects and in some senses retains the character of the existing building there, changing in materiality, massing, and its approach to the interface on the public realm. You can see here also in this image that the public realm benefits from the current condition, which is a surface parking lot that also includes parking in some instances that goes up and beyond the private property line into the public right-of-way. So this proposal would correct that in expanding the public right-of-way, allowing for room for pedestrian seating, landscaping in terms of trees and other landscaping elements, which will soften the interface, as well as at the main entrance, you can see there's a little bit of an inset, which we're calling a mini public plaza. It's private space, but does allow for increased pedestrian enjoyment and interaction with the street at this area. There are also two areas where a breezeway or a walkway comes through the site from the north to the south, which helps to break up the massing, add a little bit of porosity to the area, which again softens and improves pedestrian conditions here. And also importantly to note, in terms of the building massing and its approach to interface with the public right of realm, the vehicle access has been shared with the property to the east, which is another Claridge property, which means that there is a reduction and a removal of vehicle interaction with the public realm here, and therefore creating a more safe and approachable sidewalk and public realm as you kind of travel along this portion of the block. I'll go to the next slide just to have a different perspective for us to look at. The tower separation here is reflective of an urban and dense environment. All separation distances are following the guidance of the city's high-rise design guidelines, as well as the official plan direction in this regard, in terms of providing those separation distances between 12 to 14 meters when shared with their neighboring properties, achieving the 14, 15 to 20 meter separation distances that are more commonly considered appropriate here in a very dense downtown core. Obviously, as you transition to other portions of the city, you might see greater tower separation distances, but in this instance, these have been applied to help to ensure there is some sky views preserved, privacy isn't overly diminished by too much overlook, and that the building fits well within the context. So I think that's really what I was hoping to discuss today. I'm really happy to answer any other questions or provide clarification on the application.
Thank you so much, Chair. The reason I insisted on holding this item and going through the motions of presentation is because there was no public consultation for this project. Yeah, even though my office met with the applicant and offered to host one multiple times. So I'm just wondering why.
So I can kind of, and through you, Mr. Chair, I can start to answer this question and pass it to Vincent if he has anything else that he'd like to add. Throughout the process, there's obviously an opportunity to meet with the public, and there are other opportunities in terms of finding ways to engage and receive feedback from members of the public, the councillor's office, and the community associations. We had a great discussion during the pre-application meeting with the community association representatives at that meeting. We also received a lengthy letter during the formal technical circulation process, which we reviewed and considered as the project evolved. Obviously, we've been working collaboratively with staff and their expertise, as well as the information and feedback that they received from the community. And then, as is mandated, we're also here today, which is considered a public meeting as well, to receive feedback from elected officials as well as the community. So although a formal public information meeting wasn't held in this instance, there was a lot of opportunity that we took and received important feedback from various stakeholders.
Well, this is a very big building, and we have a very, very active community. And it is quite standard for developers to work with us to hold a consultation, to have a public information session, which didn't happen in this case. I understand that under the current legislation, it's entirely at the desire of the applicant, but I would just like to state publicly, this is an outlier. Most developers are quite happy to work with us to do this. Claridge was not. I do believe buildings such as this one would be improved with community feedback, including the pre-application phase, as you said, but having that public meeting, we host them on Zoom. They usually go extremely well. The reason I insisted that you do this presentation is so that if the community wanted to come back and watch this on committee, they could, because they did not get the opportunity. I just think the structural changes by the province, the lack of direction from staff on either the incorporation of councillors in the process or better guidelines around the incorporation of public meetings in the pre-consult process. I don't have a solution, but it remains really concerning. It's a broader problem than this building. I appreciate that this is going to pass committee, that it meets our official plan, but on principle, I'm going to dissent on this file simply because of the developer's unwillingness to meet with the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Troster. I don't see any other members of council signed up. Wilson, please go ahead.
Thanks. Sometimes I blend in.
Oh.
So, I mean, I was going to ask this privately, but whatever, we're here. I really like the sort of the softening of the streetscape with the overhang of I think starting at the 3rd or 4th floors. I note that in the zoning document that staff produced, it includes a consideration for some retail, ground level retail, and I think with the replacement of the existing building at 100 Gloucester, it takes away, I want to say 2 units that are there right now, and honestly, that stretch of Gloucester Street is going to become quite sterile if it's not replaced. And are there any indications right now? I know it's very early, but are there any indications right now that some form of retail will be there when the building opens?
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor. Right now, we are preparing for and including that provision within the zoning and within the proposed building to accommodate future retail commercial uses on the western portion of the podium, and so there is full intention that will be hopefully leased out and continue to add to the vibrancy of that portion of this street. And so we think that the condition is improved. There's better accessibility through this new design, as well as the improvements to the public way in terms of the sidewalk and removing that surface parking. So we're hoping it is, yes, it's well used in a desirable commercial location in this area.
Great, thank you. It's a great captive audience, right, up top with the 2 buildings, so thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I'm kind of surprised about not having a public meeting. I've never had an issue with that, and it's pretty routine, so I'm sorry to hear that. And I know there'll be a lot of pressure going forward because of time constraints, but you can have them before the file hits the DEBAP, and therefore not in the time zone of the 90 days or whatever it is. But I wanted to know about affordable housing, because it mentioned that it's still being considered. Are you considering affordable housing?
It is, thank you, Councillor. It has been a consideration of the project. I think I'll pass it to Vincent to discuss in greater detail.
Yeah, we're definitely exploring like the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund and the new affordable CIP that the City of Ottawa just approved. So we're looking to access some of those funds. It's not decided yet, but we're definitely exploring that.
I hope that you'll strongly consider it, considering your location. This is an excellent place when people will not need transit. They won't need cars. So I would, in the strongest way, I would hope that you'll consider it and look at partnering. Ottawa Community Housing, if I can pitch them, does partner with developers for that. So look at all options. This is important if we want to give back to the community and have a balanced, tenancy. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that this building will be right beside Operation Come Home, which is an organization that works to end youth homelessness. They have a block leasing program that they do in collaboration with the city, where they rent a whole bunch of apartments, they hold the leases, and they sublet as supportive housing for youth to prevent homelessness. So I would highly recommend you talk to them because they're going to be your neighbors. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Troster. And now I don't see any further questions from members. Is this item carried? Oh, shoot. I caught myself this time. Sorry, questions, staff? I don't have any hands up, but I'll go Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair. When was this application formally submitted?
Excuse me. I believe it was submitted in spring of last year, so 2023.
Okay, so roughly.
I don't have the exact date for you, but I'm happy to pull that.
Approximately a year. And so I asked this question now and then because obviously under the new requirements per provincial legislation, we're supposed to get this through in 90 days or less. So what were some of the challenges you encountered that took a year to get to committee?
Thank you for the question. It would have not been subject to that 90-day timeline when we had received it. So it would have proceeded regularly in accordance with our previous procedures and timelines.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, though, what contributed to this file taking a year to get to Planning Committee?
Thank you for the question. So there are a number of comments and considerations that need to be made during the development review process. Many of that included design considerations such as going to the UDRP that happened after the application was received, so that also takes time. There was also, again, receiving public comments, taking those into consideration and providing very thorough feedback to the applicant team. Again, engineering, transportation, forestry, you name it, many other departments provide review on the application, and we're working towards a number of other items through the site plan control application and hope to resolve those prior to staff's delegated authority report.
Okay, that's good. And can I just be reminded, when did that date go into effect for 90-day, 60-day? There's so many different portions of legislation that have been passed. Does anyone?
Chair, I believe it was July 1st, 2023
That's
for
right.
that in effect date for the 60 days and 90 days for site plan and zoning respectively.
Can staff comment on how many applications are still being processed that were filed prior to July 1st that have not yet come to Planning Committee?
Chair, I don't have that number at the top of my head. I'm happy to get you that number before council or in the next week or so.
It's not urgent, but we're probably going to see a number of applications still for many months come that were submitted prior to July 1st. Okay, listen, just my comments are, this is a highly appropriate site for a tall building in the downtown core. I looked at a map, it's under 200 meters from LRT, it's surrounded by towers, we need residential in the core. There's nothing here that is outstanding for me. I certainly support the councillor's comment. We absolutely should engage, be a good neighbor, and have consultation, but as far as the merits of this application, I'm fully supportive.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington. Is this item carried? Carried with a dissent from Councillor Troster. Thank you very much. And our last substantive item of the day is Weeping Willow Lane. Councillor Curry, do you want to run through the presentation, bring the applicants up, or do you just have comments?
I have a number of questions that, because some of my residents who were going to present today just sort of said, I sent my information, but I'd like you to ask some questions to get some answers. So I have questions mostly for staff.
Okay. And so I know, did you want to speak, Miguel and Patricia? Okay, so I think we'll just proceed with the presentation, proceed with the applicant's comments, and then proceed with questions to staff.
Thank you. So I have a presentation about 100 Weeping Willow Lane in Canada. Next slide, please. The site is located on the south side of Weeping Willow Lane between Varley Drive and Tarrant Road. The site has a land area of approximately 3.2 hectares and is currently developed with an 8-story rental apartment building containing 85 units and associated surface parking. Access to the site is obtained by Weeping Willow Lane, which is a private roadway. On the southern and eastern part of the site is a creek that forms part of the Kissel Drain and is heavily wooded. On the western part of the site is a large grass berm and municipal walkways adjacent to Varley Drive. Immediately north of Weeping Willow Lane is a development of 2-story townhouses. West of Varley Drive are detached dwellings, and east of Tarrant Road is a 2-story townhouse development as well as a small retail mall. Next slide, please. The subject lands are designated as neighborhood in the suburban transect. Neighborhood shall be predominantly low-rise. However, higher heights are permitted in areas characterized or zoned for taller buildings. Next slide, please. The development is proposed as a mid-rise apartment building fronting onto Weeping Willow Lane. The building has been designed to step down to a height of 6 stories along Varley Drive. Step backs are included after the 2nd and 6th stories. In addition to the private and communal amenity space provided within the site and building, over 800 square meters of parkland is proposed to be dedicated to the city adjacent to the existing Little Park along the frontage of Varley Drive. If approved, the development will be subject to site plan control. Next slide, please. As a result of public consultation, the building was reduced in units from 142 to 126. There is an increased setback to Varley Drive from 10 meters to a minimum of 24 meters. Reduction in height from 9 stories to 6 stories along Varley Drive. The introduction of a step back. The provision of a public park. And a removal of permissions on the site for a retirement home to provide certainty of development. Next slide, please. It is recommended that Planning and Housing Committee recommend Council to approve the zoning bylaw amendment for 100 Weeping Willow Lane to permit a mid-rise residential building. The amendments include zoning lands for a public park and environmental protection, reducing resident parking rate from 1.2 spaces per unit to 0.93 spaces per unit, and maintain the existing R5A zoning and permitted building heights, and amend the site-specific schedule to create a very detailed building envelope for the proposed building. Next slide, please. The proposal conforms with the official plan by providing a mid-rise built form on a site characterized by permissions for taller buildings. The official plan states that neighborhoods located in the suburban area shall accommodate residential growth while recognizing a suburban pattern of development, while supporting an evolution towards 15-minute neighborhoods. The proposal conforms to the transition policies of the official plan as the building is well stepped back from the surrounding neighborhood and is outside the 45-degree angular plane, providing an appropriate transition. The site is also well served by amenities and transit. Next slide, please. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Warren, Mr. Tremblay? Obviously, a fairly comprehensive overview from staff, so opportunity to run through any missing ground.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. I do have a presentation, and I think I'll pull it up and I'll just go through the whole presentation that we prepared. Perfect. Good morning again. My name is Patricia Warren, and I'm a planner at FO10 Planning and Design. I'm joined by Miguel Tremblay, a partner at FO10. I'm also joined online by Jack Mangan and Mark Brulé of Homestead Land Holdings, the owner of the property. Next slide, please. As outlined by Ms. Stern, the proposed development consists of a 9-story mid-rise apartment building with 126 residential units. There's a mix of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, but I'd like to note that the 2-bedroom units nearly double the 1-bedroom units that are being proposed. As Ms. Stern had noted, there is an 877 square meter park being proposed on the site. Next slide, please. Just to provide some additional site context, the subject property has frontage on Tarrant Road, Weeping Willow Lane, as well as Varley Drive, and it is located within 600 meters of the future Tarrant March Road BRT station. So as you can see on the slide, the orange line delineates that 600-meter radius from transit. Next slide, please. The subject property is located within the suburban transect and is designated neighborhood. The neighborhood policies of the official plan support height beyond 4 stories in areas already characterized by taller buildings, such as the subject property, which is already characterized by an 8-story building. The neighborhood policies also provide direction that additional height may be considered with only a zoning bylaw amendment application where there are existing taller buildings. The proposed development conforms to the suburban transect and neighborhood policies and represents intensification of an existing property within proximity to transit. Next slide, please. So this is, what you're seeing on the slide here is the project evolution. So from our September 21 site plan to the most recent January 2024 site plan. The evolution of the project is a result of feedback received from the community, the councillor, and city staff through the technical circulation process, several meetings, and 2 public information meetings. One of the most significant changes to the proposed development is the reallocation of height along Weeping Willow Lane. The September 2021 proposal had located the majority of the building on the portion of the site permitted a maximum building height of 30 meters. But in order to address community and staff comments, the building was reoriented, resulting in much more of the building being located on the portion of the site currently permitted a maximum building height of 20 meters. With these changes, it resulted, as Ms. Stern had noted, an increased setback from Varley Drive, going from a setback of approximately 9.8 meters from Varley Drive to 24 meters as a minimum setback. Additionally, the building was transitioned downward in height to Varley Drive, with the maximum building height along Varley Drive 6 stories. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide here, but I'll just conclude on this slide, which demonstrates the application of the 45-degree angular plane along both Weeping Willow Lane and Varley Drive. Although the angular plane is just one tool used to provide transition between low and mid-rise heights, these images demonstrate setbacks and stepbacks that have been used to achieve transition to the north and to the west. You'll see on the slide that there is a distance of approximately 50 meters from the proposed building to a residence on Varley Drive, and the building along Weeping Willow is fully captured within that 45-degree angular plane. Next slide, please. That ends my presentation.
Well, and just maybe in anticipation of a question from the councillor, so there is a new public park that's going to be located on Varley, be dedicated to the city, and part of the intent of that is to compensate or replace for the loss of a previously well-used toboggan hill that was on private property, but still recognized as a community amenity. So, thank you.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Great, thanks. I think a few people had the toboggan hill question, so thanks for dealing with that right off the bat. So yeah, the community will enjoy that consultation on the park and what could be in there, so we're really thankful. Honestly, I really want to thank Lisa Stern for her ongoing efforts here. I think really the majority of Beaverbrook residents would say, please vote against this, because it's a very tall building in the middle of, nice little Beaverbrook. However, this land was always designated to have 2 buildings, right? And so when Lisa just said, this is an area for taller buildings, I think Beaverbrook said, what are you talking about? No, it isn't. Well, it actually is, because that land has a very tall apartment building on it, and so there will always to be 2, and this one will be built. So I really just want to make a couple things clear and ask a few questions, because I will certainly be supporting this. And the amount of time that Lisa and FOTEN spent with the Canada Beaverbrook Community Association and former Councillor Wilkinson on this is extraordinary. Not only did everybody have consultation in 2014 on this land when it was a different building, it was just a 4-story seniors residence. It all started again with a completely different design and worked to move the building, keeping the height, 6 and then 9. So that took a lot of time by everybody working through all of that. So I really appreciate that. A few questions I have, when
Sorry,
we talk about...
Councillor Kerr, are the questions for the applicant?
I don't have anything else for the applicant,
Okay,
no.
so I just
Thanks, really,
I
I
will
just have for staff,
imperiously
but thank you.
dismiss them and thank them for their presentation today. So questions to staff, go ahead.
Great, thanks. So when we talk about the private road that is there, we talked a lot about this, the community is still asking, why could we not have the traffic go out onto Tarrant instead of coming onto Varley?
This is something that can be looked at through the site plan agreement. Currently, there's what's called a 30-centimeter reserve on the Tarrant Road frontage, which prohibits legal access. Access directly onto Varley or onto Tarrant rather would have to be examined. We certainly wouldn't want to see a full movement access onto Tarrant Road due to traffic constraints, and Tarrant Road is a collector which is intended for traffic to move through. The traffic impact assessment submitted by the applicant in support of the application showed that there is adequate capacity on all the local roadways within the neighborhood. So access Weeping Willow to Varley is well supported and viable.
Okay. Well, we will look forward to those further discussions because people have asked for it, but they also recognize once you open that up, if it were two-way, then you bring more traffic onto Varley, right? So there's a lot to consider there, but it's all to come in conversations, hopefully. The other question the community is asking is the concept of 15-minute neighborhoods. I live nearby. There are, as you said, there's a Beaverbrook Community Association building. Then there's the mall there. There's a mall across the road from the other building that's on site. There's down the road, there's Metro at Tarrant and March Road. There's the Home Hardware Mall. There's banks. All of that goes into considering 15-minute communities?
Correct. So the site is within 600 meters of existing and future transit. There's transit on Weeping Willow, local routes. There's rapid transit routes existing on Tarrant Road, and there is existing walkway access from the site to Tarrant Road. There is also local bus service on Beaverbrook. There's a grocery store within 1 kilometer of the site, and again, that little retail mall. So the site is well served. There's 2 schools within walking distance as well. The site is well served by transit and amenities and parks. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer so that people who are watching this now can understand what that actually means. Just 2 last questions. When a building is constructed, we've seen the one at Tarrant and March Road and all the construction vehicles all parked along Stacy Drive, which has been somewhat problematic. When this one is constructed, would there be, because it's Varley, would there be more of an area that we would set out as a city where construction vehicles have to park while the building's being constructed?
It's something that can be determined at site plan and working with the councillor perhaps and the applicant, there can be an agreement or construction management plan to park on the site or in a more desirable area. In the vicinity of the site, most of the streets, at least one side, are assigned no parking, so there would not be parking on this side of Varley.
Yeah, I think that's the community's concern, that might be difficult. Question about the park. When would that consultation on what the park will have in it and whether the toboggan hill, how it would be constructed, if it's going to be there, when would that start?
The park would be designed and dedicated through the future site plan control application.
So the timing though?
That would be a question for the applicant. Once, if this zoning is approved, it would be at the applicant's will to submit a site plan control application.
Okay, well, I'll keep the community apprised of that. I think there was one other comment I was going to make. I just would say that, you know, the traffic study during the pandemic is something the community is stuck on, that they don't think that it was actually accurate because of that time. And I wondered if staff had any further comment on the traffic impact assessment.
I have confirmed with transportation staff multiple times that they are very satisfied with the transportation impact assessment submitted by the applicant. It was calibrated to 2019 numbers, so outside the pandemic, as well as the roads in the vicinity of the site are operating at acceptable levels. And yes, there is additional density being added to the site, but it's approximately under 30 trips during the peak hour that can be expected. So the number of trips expected during the peak hour from this site are relatively low still.
Okay, thank you. And I will just reassure my colleagues that to come is a sidewalk project along Varley, because Varley has been a very, very difficult road to walk along, and it's quite dangerous, actually. I think you saw that in many of the submissions. That sidewalk will be a game changer as it goes. There's 3 elementary schools on this road and no sidewalk, so the fact that we are putting in a sidewalk is going to be a very important part of this whole application. Anyway, thanks again to everybody on this, and I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry. Councillor Brockington.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to the local councillor for bringing the local concerns forward. I too will be supporting the application. I have more of a macro level type of question for staff, and that's about what I see are the proliferation of new city parks that are being made to a degree I never saw before when I first came to council. And I'll expand a bit here, where we have a number of developments in my ward where there's like a little postage-size stamp of green space left, and the developer wants to make it into a city park, a park that we would then have to take on and pay for going forward. That's not big enough for really any type of park amenities to make it a destination in the neighborhood. For the significant growth that's happening in the Mooney's Bay neighborhood, we've got, you know, the Canoe Bay project, we've got the Brazil project, we've got La Reveille, we have Norbury residents. Residents are saying, we don't need more parks. Residents are saying, in Riverside Park, you've got Mooney's Bay Park across the street, and if you look at a map of Riverside Park, we've got parks almost on every street corner. So my concern is, we create new city parks. Sometimes I think are inappropriately too small. We can't make them truly playground type parks for families to go and visit, and yet we are stuck with the costs of operating this park going forward. And I think what I'm trying to work through here is there's an opportunity for public space or common space or green space on site, but keep it so that the owner of the property is responsible and not an official city park. I have sort of my own vision for parks and what parks should contain and the type of amenities. Sometimes the city is forcing a developer to yield a very small piece of land, which we think we want to take on as a park. So I know we've gone through the Parks and Rec Master Plan. We've tried to look at amenities and based it on population, but I'm just saying there's some pushback. It's an ironic for me to raise, but at the end of the day, it's cost to us that all middle managers and Parks and Rec say we're not financing significant to begin with. We don't have enough money to take care of our assets in our park. So if staff had any further comment, I'm all ears. It's not germane to this project, but something I've been wanting to raise, that in certain communities, the size of parks just simply will not yield amenities that community expects to have them in to begin with because they're just so small.
Chair, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was approved by council spoke to land dedication and placed a priority on land versus cash in lieu, where sizes of properties exceed, I think it's 4,000 square meters. And so staff, from a development review perspective or from a planning services perspective, the applications are all circulated to our Parks and Recreation Department, which is where our parks planners sit on our org structure, and they follow that policy. And through that circulation, we'll identify where opportunities exist to take land within the existing policies approved by council. And so we often would, it's not typically the developers that are pushing to dedicate public park. Often the discussion with developers is that they would prefer to provide cash in lieu for a variety of reasons. One of them is there is a discount on the cash in lieu amount that's provided versus the value of the land, but also developers tend to be in the business of developing land, and they want to continue to focus on that aspect of their business. And so, it's generally not driven by development. It's generally driven by the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and that land first policy within it.
Thank you. I appreciate that context. And, for one big development I'm working with, Taggart, I said just that your subdivision you're proposing is right beside a major park. Give me funds through cash in lieu. We'll make this park a better park rather than a 3-lot strip of green space that we're going to call a park and we can't squeeze any real amenities into it. It doesn't make sense. So I'm, as I said, Chair, concerned about the city acquiring these new parks that we have to be the owners of going forward and pay all the operating costs, when in fact the greater strategy, at least in my community, in neighborhoods where we have sufficient parks, is to make the existing parks that much better with new amenities and to bring them up to pace. But again, not exactly germane to the development in Canada North, which I'm supporting, but something I wanted to raise at this committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brockington. And we do have a parkland first policy. I think those of us who were here last term, we all voted for it. There's a threshold of parkland size that we have directed staff to acquire. So, there is a path obviously to amending that through council action. But in the meantime, I am glad that staff are very appropriately, as always, following council's directions. Colleagues, is that item carried? Carried. All right, those of you who need to go listen to the minister speak, that's the end of our substantive agenda. What do we got? Oh, we still got some fun stuff left. No more voting, though. There is a notice of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting. But Councillor Troster may have missed that this is the point now. Councillor Troster, you got a notice of motion?
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a long one, but hopefully if I read it now, we can get to the substance of committee in 2 weeks. Whereas on January 24, 2024, the Council of the City of Hamilton unanimously adopted Ontario's first anti-rent evictions bylaw, together with the significant related investments to increase staffing enforcement capacity in order to deter landlords from using renovations for bad faith evictions and to assist in preserving existing housing stock. And whereas Hamilton's renovation license and relocation bylaw will require a landlord to obtain a renovation license prior to commencing any renovation that requires an N13 eviction notice be issued to a tenant under the Residential Tenancies Act, and to provide proof of a building permit and an engineering report confirming that vacant possession of the unit is required to carry out the renovation work. And whereas the Council of the City of Ottawa has implemented new regulations to address the availability and quality of rental housing, such as the short-term rental bylaw, the rental housing property management bylaw, and complementary amendments to the property standards bylaw, as well as the 10-year housing and homelessness plan and various housing loss prevention programs which are currently being reviewed and updated. And whereas Ottawa City Council also considered landlord licensing regime through the staff report rental accommodation study and regulatory regime, which was not recommended based on efficiency, enforceability, and sustainability considerations, as well as legal uncertainties, and approved the staff report review of tools to prohibit or prevent renovictions. Whereas tenants in the City of Ottawa continue to experience hardship through the process of renovictions by landlords, and the loss of existing housing stock continues to be a concern. And whereas a recent report from the rate of indicated that the rate of affordable housing loss is 31 units lost in the private market for every one affordable unit constructed, and bad faith renovation is a major driver of that loss. Whereas, per recent LTB data, the number of N12 notices filed in Ottawa between 2017 and 2021 represented an increase of 160%. And whereas per recent LTB data, the number of N13 notices filed in Ottawa between 2017 and 2022 represented an increase of 545%, with N13 issuance tripling between 2022 and 2023. Therefore, be it resolved that the Planning and Housing Committee recommend council direct the General Manager of Emergency and Protective Services Department, in consultation with the Community and Social Services Department, the Planning, Real Estate, and Economic Development Department, Legal Services, to review the City of Hamilton's renovation license and relocation bylaw and report back to the appropriate standing committee of council by Q4 2024 with a preliminary assessment of the feasibility of developing similar anti-renovictions bylaw in the City of Ottawa, which should include an outline of the anticipated timelines, costs, and resource implications to do this work, as well as the planned or approved projects on existing departmental work plans that would have to be deferred or postponed as a result. That is a very long one. We'll talk about it in 2 weeks, but I just want to thank city staff for getting us here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Troster. Yeah, we will deal with that in 2 weeks. Just for Councillor Brockington, the mayor's office, Fred, that report, if we do move ahead with creating that, could potentially come to any number of our committees. I've already indicated I'm happy to deal with it here, but that'll be a discussion if that motion passes. Okay, so on to inquiries. Councillor Kitts, you have questions.
I have an inquiry, yes. Get it up on the screen. Kelly, do you have it? Okay, so in light of forthcoming updates to the development charges background study and bylaw, could the program coordinator development charges please provide an analysis as part of the upcoming 2023 DC Treasurer's report of the historical roads and related services growth related project funding allocations since 2015, which is outlined in Table 2 of the 2013 Transportation Master Plan, I can't speak, broken down by major project categories.
Thank you very much. Ask and ye shall receive. There is no other business. We'll adjourn. Our next meeting is on Wednesday, April the 24th, 2024. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for staff for all your work. Thank you very much, Kelly. You're a rock star.